Production speed has increased. Perhaps it shall be temporary, perhaps it shall be permanent. But here we are, with another update on the happenings aboard the derelict Gestalt cruiser Enforcer. We left off on a bunch of cliffhangers last time, so I will not keep you in suspense any longer. On with the story. In a blocked-off cabin. The black liquid clung to Izzy's shoe even as she tried to withdraw it. But it did not act like a mere liquid. Izzy could feel the resistance as she pulled back, almost like it was actively trying to hold on. She awkwardly hopped back on one foot as more and more of the bizarre substance slowly but deliberately flowed under the door. Izzy, now precariously suspended on one leg, with the other being pulled back towards the door by the elastic black goop, started to panic. She pulled back, which resulted in her shoe coming loose. She fell forward, face planting onto the linoleum floor. Dazed, she did not have long before it would retarget her again, Izzy only barely managing an undignified scoot out of the way. She looked around for ways out. Things did not initially look promising. The room had only one exit, and only her ancestors would know what was on the other side by now. But Izzy had a pretty good guess. The door would not be an escape. The ventilation duct, however, on closer inspection, did hold some promise. It had tool marks on it. Thinking quickly, she located the screwdriver that probably made them on the desk nearby. By now the black pool was halfway into the room and closing. Frantically, she used the screwdriver to undo the bolts on the vent cover. She could see inside. It would be a truly tight fit once she cleared the obstruction. She saw why there were so many tool marks. There was a stash for alcohol inside. Under other circumstances she might have chuckled, but she did not have time.
"Suck on this!"
She screeched and hurled the alcohol at the black puddle. It did not do much other than shatter and embed large chunks of glass in the strange substance that did not seem to harm it. It still flowed slowly toward her, basically unimpeded.
Definitely time to go.
She could not measure, but if she could fit her skull and hips, she had an escape route, the upside of being an anthrat. It was undignified, and her legs flailed as they scrambled for purchase against the wall. She felt her foot connect with a lamp on the desk, knocking it to the floor. The shattering of the bulb on the floor caused a spark, which Izzy could barely hear over the sound of her own clothes and fur rustling in her ears as she squeezed through the vent, using her feet to scoot forward. Her foot also felt sudden heat from behind. She couldn't look behind to check. Turning around in any form was not an option. She could only feel the heat as the fire began to build, until it began fading again as she gained distance. In the darkness of the vents, she could only feel by the grace of her now fully extended whiskers. But she could hear, and she heard some faint sounds of screeing in the distance. Did she actually hurt the thing? Then her ears were drawn to something else. The faint sounds of running and fighting. Not far away, running down the hall. In the corridor, Heidi saw a clutched-together mess of metal and wires that was somehow still crackled with energy. Heidi could swear she saw several laser guns in the mess. It had a crude diamond pattern painted on one of the larger panels.
"Spades? Do not stop. It will not hurt you,"
Spades said, right on Heidi's tail.
"Diamond has been informed."
Heidi did not stop to question just yet. Diamond would reveal themselves in time, she was sure. She got to the far side of the machine, which clearly had been cobbled together from spare parts. And those were definitely laser weapons. As soon as Spades joined Heidi, a grid of laser fire filled the corridor, halting the pursuing oil monster in its track. A new, but eerily similar voice to Spades, this time with a bit of emotion, crackled through a speaker near Heidi.
"Need laser fire input."
Heidi, still breathing heavily, watched as the powerful beams of light vaporized chunks of the monster, which retreated down the corridor and into the darkness it came from.
"I should cause it to lick its wounds. Hope bother us for a while.
The emotional tone was of smug satisfaction.
Must be vigilant.
Spades cautioned the new voice.
Diamond, I presume.
Heidi said, turning toward the speaker.
The same. You must be the Otter Spades mentioned over comms. Funny, we didn't have any otters in the squad. Or as part of the ship's skeleton crew. This means you must be new, which means circumstances have changed. Unexpected, perhaps good, perhaps bad.
Heidi Sterling, Center Space Search and Rescue.
Center Space? So the old fox was not crazy.
Old fox? We did find the remains of an anth fox up on the bridge.
The sounds of shuffling down the corridor they had just come from snapped everyone back to attention.
Hold that thought.
Diamond said.
The plot seems to not be done with us yet.
Except it was not a roiling mass of sentient oil that scrambled around the corner, nor a contaminated zombie, but rather an anthrat. A very panicked and disturbed-looking anthrat. In fact, it was the rat that Heidi had tried chasing down in the first place. Heidi drew for a gun that had been lost somewhere in the fallen chase. Diamond and Spades had the situation handled, though.
Don't shoot! Friendly!
The rat said, apparently not noticing Heidi until just now.
Oh, it's you. Maybe not.
Get behind the defensive perimeter if you want to live.
Spades said, flat as ever.
Another assault is imminent.
The rat complied as the turrets tracked her, holding their fire. She also momentarily winced.
Did you just scan me? Rude.
Safety precautions.
Spades dismissed it.
How would you even? Alert. All my sensors have been compromised. I'm blind there now. Definitely up to something.
Diamond said, her voice crackling over the local speakers like it was on an old tape recording.
Likely preparing to rush us.
Heidi said,
This thing is smart. It can't just be that. Be prepared.
As much as we can.
Heidi looked around for anything she could use as a weapon.
Truce, rat?
The rat paused again, looking uncertain.
We don't have time for trust issues, both of you.
Diamond said over the speaker.
Either you'll help and get out of the kill box I've got set up, or you're a target.
Many footfalls were beginning to faintly echo down the corridor.
Sounds like we don't have much of a choice.
The rat grunted.
Got any more of those laser rifles?
Heidi gave up on looking for her own gun.
Out of time.
Spades said, as a shambling figure crossed into view. This one was wearing a Gestalt uniform, but was infected with the same black goop that the other one had on it. Rapid pulsed lasers turned it into a flaming wreck of flesh and bones, while the black fluid surged forward out of it. It made it considerably further than the last one before the laser grid vaporized it.
Clever thing. It's using the crew it's captured as literal meat armor, since it's so flammable. Testing our defenses, too.
That would explain the screaming earlier.
The rat chuckled a little. Meanwhile, Heidi dug through another junk pile, her efforts renewed by the fresh horror looming down the corridor at them. The rat's face had a look of pure disgust on it. Best to be grateful for the environment suit and not think about the smell. Part flesh and fur was unpleasant, as Heidi knew from experience. Izzy, too, had reached into another pile of junk, immediately pulling up what appeared to be a holster and some kind of pistol, along with the backbone of some long-dead sapient. The rat paused, looking at Heidi, then back at the gun in her hands. She had a choice to make. She could either try to use the unfamiliar gun herself, or she could hand it off to the otter. Her squeamishness was also threatening to get the best of her. Heidi had the bearing of an ex-military person about her, perhaps even current military. Izzy wasn't sure at this point. She probably knew her way around weapons more than Izzy did anyway. Time was not hers to spare, so Izzy swallowed her pride. Trusting no one had gotten her into this mess. Perhaps some trust will get her out.
Over here, you can probably use this better than me.
Heidi took the gun without question from the rat, nodding in slightly confused acceptance. The rat was right, even if she didn't know it. Heidi was retired Center Space Navy. She had been para-rescue, and had been in a lot of fights. She was glad to be able to contribute to the defense instead of flailing about. She noticed that Spades was not actively firing down the corridor, but rather was looking around the room that they found themselves in. Now that Heidi was too, she saw this place used to be the ship's gymnasium. Maybe it just wants the iron?
Pretty sure it just wants us. It couldn't get iron from anywhere on the ship.
Diamond said, firing off another salvo of less effective laser fire. This time she nailed a uniformed bear, a Chimerican, who shrugged it off and kept charging down the corridor with a primal roar.
Ah, crap. There's a lot of meat on that one.
Spade snapped to the problem and used a shotgun she produced from inside her body to down the bear with a deafening report. Izzy covered her ears, wincing. It seemed to stop the immediate threat. Diamonds then used the lasers to mop up the massive amount of blot now spattered throughout the kill box. Heidi, however, was still more worried about something else. She looked up to the ventilation duct just in time to see some tendrils of inky blackness start to pour out.
Up high!
The otter had no idea whether this gun was even charged or functional, for that matter. At this point, she could only pray to her ancestors that there was some left. It looked to be a human weapon, but she didn't know them as well. She could use them well enough, though. Definitely a custom job of some sort. She aimed up and squeezed the trigger. She felt no kick, as was standard for energy weapons. The rest of what happened was anything but standard. A beam emitted, but it wasn't a laser. It was a ray of destruction that disintegrated not only the incoming ink monstrosity, but also most of the vent along with it, and also made a small hole into the floor above. If she hadn't been wearing a bubble helmet, she might have kissed the corpse that had been carrying this thing, strictly metaphorically. Spades turned in what appeared to be shock.
Warn me next time.
You're one to talk.
Izzy grumbled.
What kind of gun did you hand me?
Heidi said, still looking for other targets, in full tactical mode now.
The first one I could. I think it was one of our last acquisitions before your band of thugs came on the ship.
Search and rescue. We're not the Chimericans.
Heidi said, as she blasted down the corridor, supplementing Diamond's laser grid, and also melting a bulkhead or 5 in the distance.
Careful with that thing, or you'll blow another hole in the hull. Gloves should have been back by now.
There's more of you robots?
Heidi said,
How many more?
Just 2, Diamond said.
holding back another fierce wave of stolen flesh.
Gloves and Hart.
Where's Hart?
We're trying to find her. We got separated and she's gone radio silent.
Izzy was not happy with that news.
Well, that's ominous. But we need to get off this ship, the faster the better. There seems to be no end to the black goop.
Spades gave a robotic death glare to Izzy.
We are not leaving without Hart.
The red has a point, though. We can't just hole up in here and hope to win.
Diamond said in between volleys. Heidi fired another shot down the corridor into what was now a rising tide of black goo. The monster was either bigger than she thought or somehow growing. It seemed to be absorbing shots from Diamond's laser turrets now too. Even Heidi's shots were less effective.
I think it's trying to run us out of power.
Diamond said, then lowered her volume.
I'm at 15% capacitor and falling.
That would explain that. Exit routes?
Izzy asked.
You've got to have more than one.
Spades motioned to a set of doors in the back of the room. Heidi moved to it.
Best to make sure we aren't flanked.
You aren't. Sensors report nothing of interest back there.
Diamond said. Heidi hesitated but wanted confirmation for herself, so she opened the door anyway. It was a good thing she did. Black goop had coated the hall beyond, and as soon as the door opened, surged toward Heidi. She blasted away with her new ray gun, suppressing the black tide for the moment.
What?
Diamond said, swiveling a turret to cover the new front.
Get down.
Heidi jumped as heavy lasers flashed over her head and crawled, pistol in hand, out of the new line of fire.
Son of a sea hog!
Right. So it's clear it can compromise your sensors. We can't trust your data.
Great. Good to know. I'm working on a solution.
Diamond said.
No viable routes found.
You were on this ship before this disaster.
Heidi came over to Izzy.
Didn't exactly go exploring every conduit.
Izzy said, conveniently leaving out earlier.
So we're trapped.
Affirmative.
Diamond said.
I don't see a way out with what's available to us without blowing a hole in the walls and possibly the hull.
Izzy said. It was then Heidi noticed the buzzing. It came from the grip of Heidi's gun, muffled by the glove of her suit, but still perceptible. That probably wasn't anything good, but not much she could do about whatever was wrong with it. Likely a low power alarm. She'd been using it a lot.
I'm not even sure that will be an option soon.
The black tide was advancing slowly again, despite the laser turret defenses pumping out coordinated shot after shot, running Anth-Zombie and Ink Monster alike. It was growing to the point that Izzy felt breathing the noxious vapors was not doing any favors to her, but she did not have any other options, unlike Heidi, who still had her suit and had a supply of breathable air. Izzy started coughing when she got a full plume of the nasty vapors as it suddenly blew toward her. Heidi saw the cause of the smoke problem. Far in the back behind Diamond's kill zones, she saw a black mass with spinning blades. This thing was actively trying to kill both her and Izzy with toxic smoke. It was weaponizing everything it could against them, not just their fellow Anth, but its own remains as well. Heidi blasted the structure apart with her ray gun to grant everyone a reprieve.
Thanks.
Diamond said,
Smoke was following my sensors.
And killing me.
Spades pointed at a wall.
Do it.
Heidi pointed and pulled the trigger in the direction indicated. Nothing happened. Nothing at all. Again, and again she tried to squeeze a shot at the wall. Nothing. She was out. She then swore in her native language.
Whoa, otter swears. Surprisingly squeaky.
Shut it.
Heidi snapped.
Just trying to find a little humor before the thing takes us.
Izzy said.
I don't see any ways out. May as well make the most of it.
You are a strange critter.
Heidi sighed.
Diamond, Spades, anything? No.
Spades said. Diamond remained silent. The black tide was inches away from the first of the laser turrets, well below its firing angle and not within the firing arc of others now. It crept toward the gun, taking it over with a shuddering jolt.
Ow!
Diamonds said over the speakers.
Lost it. Rogue laser turret, take cover.
Heidi found a weight rack to hide behind, but the laser turret wasn't going for her or any of the others. Instead, it unleashed fire on the remaining turrets under Diamond's control, blowing them to pieces one by one, until Diamond's targeted it.
I have nothing.
Diamond said, firing the last of her lasers at the rising jet black flood.
Mission failure imminent.
Spades, likewise, was emptying the dregs of her flamethrower's tank, and also the shotgun. Heidi and Izzy felt a deep, reverberating thud through the walls and floor around them. Spades was also backing up toward them, passing the box with a diamond on it.
Yank me.
Diamond said. Spades obligingly pulled what looked like a hard drive with a handle, also with a diamond on it, from the box. The remaining guns went limp.
It must have been some sort of computer.
Izzy mused.
Are you insane?
Heidi said, pointing her gun at the robot. That's our only means of defense.
I am not completely insane. Just hyper-rational. We're going to be overwhelmed eventually playing this game.
Diamond's voice didn't seem surprised in what she had to say next. Her voice even tinnier through the speaker of the smaller box.
One other thing. I lied. We do have a plan.
A deafening shriek of metal and the overbearing hum of an electrical engine replaced the blank wall behind them. There were two metal protrusions that ended up right between Heidi and Izzy. They looked like the prongs of a forklift. Probably because it was one. The shriek of metal continued as the forklift ripped a further hole in the wall. Move, said a baritone voice, and grab me on the way out. Heidi did not need to be told twice. She went through the hole right after Izzy, not caring about the damage to her suit. Spades followed, carrying Diamond in one hand. Then she jolted to a sudden stop halfway through the hole. Tendrils of black swirling nastiness had caught up with her, arresting her retreat.
Mission priority. Save Heart. Diamond clubs.
No, not the plan.
Diamond said, skidding to relative safety at Heidi's feet.
We have to save her or all of this will have been for nothing.
Engaging self-destruct protocol.
Spade said.
That will ruin everything, then. We do not have time for this. Give her free.
There was no time to think about this. Spades was using her body to block the rest of the blot from coming through, except in a small trickle. It was then that the living wires parted. In a clear section she saw it. The same kind of box that Diamond's was in, mounted in what looked to be some kind of chest cavity. Heidi grabbed, pulled, and ran. The box came freely. Izzy, meanwhile, went up to the forklift. She too saw the box, and came to a similar conclusion as Heidi. She grabbed, pulled, and ran too, keeping pace with the otter.
You can run in that?
Training.
Heidi grunted, with all her focus on getting as far away from the soon-to-be exploding robot as possible. Just a sprint for their lives down the corridor until the very loud, high-pitched whine coming from behind them turned to light, then a pressure wave. The sound of cracking as the internal plexiglass of her helmet was slammed into the deck. She felt something in her nose crunch and tasted iron. There was blood pooling in her helmet now, seeping into the recently formed crack, being periodically vaporized by the intact outer force field. The otter rolled over back to where they had come from. It was utter devastation, with deck plates displaced, showing exposed wiring and conduits, mixed with flaming black bits that were rapidly being consumed. She shook her head and only succeeded in splattering a bit more blood across her field of vision. There was no other choice now. She needed to see and take care of the bleeding more than the environmental protection right now. She grabbed the hidden clasps which secured the helmet and pulled, the helmet unsealing with a hiss, immediately wiping her aching nose on the suit's sleeve. A red streak followed, but it was also eerily quiet. Nothing stirring except the intermittent whirring and purring of fans. Heidi didn't hear any disagreements. She wasn't sure whether that was a good thing or a bad thing. The strange boxes housing diamonds, spades, and apparently clubs had gone silent. Izzy was now propped up against the wall, clutching her ears, which were still ringing from the blast.
Well, we're alive.
Heidi said, offering her hand to help.
What?
Izzy said, as she took the hand. Heidi pulled and brought Izzy to her feet, at which she shakily stood on.
Don't bother answering, I know. Hopefully temporary. So what do we do now?
Heidi grabbed two boxes, one marked with club symbol and the other with spades. She shoved Diamond into Izzy's hands and motioned for her to follow.
We're going up, by our claws if necessary. We need backup.
With the backup? Dr. Steele watched with a surprising amount of calm. Joseph noted, as the metal wolf circled them. Behind the dark lenses, the doctor seemed aloof, but somehow still calculating, observing. Of course, the metal wolf was also doing the same. It uttered another low digital growl.
Any idea what we are dealing with here, Doctor?
Olga said, keeping her laser pistol trained on it and ready to fire.
One moment, I'm sorting through 100 possible matches.
Steele said. Joseph did not like the look of this thing.
When you look, it's going to pounce, so keep it off me while I look,
Steele said, sounding a little irritated.
On it.
Olga said, right as it lunged for Joseph. The fox did not dodge, still staring at the mechanical wonder before him. The polar bear opened fire with her pistol. This did not seem to do much other than make the wolf angry. It had closed enough distance that Olga's tackle went wide as well. The automaton bounced and pushed off the ceiling, its metal, jagged-toothed jaws aimed straight at the fox. Fortunately for Joseph, Steele stepped in, delivering a shoulder check to the robot's torso, knocking it aside. The mechanical quadruped was off balance, but still trying to nip at Steele. Its metal teeth missed, snapping air as the bulky human pinned the creature to the wall.
I said to keep it off me, but not like that. I like you alive, Fox.
The wall gave the robot something to push off of, however, and it was Steele's turn to bounce off the scenery as the metal wolf connected with a pneumatically powered buddy kick. He bounced his head off a console, stumbling, dazed. "Doctor!" Joseph said, shooting at the robot as it backed up for another run. He gave Steele a quick nod of thanks. Now was not the time for more words.
Sorry. I thought I could take him,
Steele said, staggering backward.
You do the thinky things,
Olga said, interposing herself this time more squarely. It was Olga's turn to take the brunt of the wrath of the metal wolf. "What is this thing?" Joseph asked again. Steele shook his head, trying to clear it.
I saw a maker's mark up close, trying to look it up now.
Do it faster.
Olga grunted as the robot bit the armor plate on her spacesuit and started shaking like an attack dog. The polar bear resisted, but it seemed to be a matter of endurance against a robot. Something even she would have a hard time with.
Is strong.
Behind the dark lenses, Steele's eyes were looking frantically at bits of text, while still trying to keep tabs on the situation outside. And there was also that primal part of his brain that told him to just fight. At the moment, he was about to give up and help the others. One of his searches finally paid off.
Custom Cyberworks, Cywolf line. Working on the bottle number.
Olga, meanwhile, felt her arm going numb from the pressure exerted by the Cywolf's jaws.
How do I kill it?
Joseph had holstered his gun and brought out a survival knife, less danger to Olga than using a firearm at this close range. He needed to find a soft spot, or in this case, cut some wires, or some other vital system. Joseph grabbed the wolf's torso and started trying to do just that. Stabbing the knife into an armored target is a tricky affair, especially when used as a desperation weapon. Joseph was more used to swords, and he hadn't really used one of those since he was 15. The first thrust bounced off, hitting armor plate straight on. The second felt like he was stabbing into gel for a brief moment, or for hitting something solid. The fox looked, and he'd found the gap. He was about to twist the knife when the Cywolf thrashed in response, knocking Joseph back, skidding along the floor. He then noticed his knife was still in the robotic beast, sticking out of the wound. Sticking out of the wound? Could a robot be wounded, or was it damage? Joseph had little opportunity to dwell on that. He recovered and found himself next to Dr. Steele. Any ideas?
A couple. First one is to keep fighting. I think we can take it. But more intriguing one has presented itself. Upgrade it!
Upgrade the murderous robot? Are you mad? Joseph said. Right. Walked right into that one.
Cywolves have a special software patch known as Upgrade S.
Steele tossed a chip at Joseph.
That should make it smarter. Thank goodness for your infinite storage.
How is this helping? Joseph asked as he caught the chip. He was tempted to snap it in half.
Because this will make the Cywolf sapient. We could actually have a chance to talk it down, instead of it just following blind programming.
Steele sat back. Meanwhile, the Cywolf had finally knocked Olga to the floor despite her strength. The machine had endurance on its side, and by now the polar bear was running low on her own.
Stop talking and help!
Data port. Back of the skull. Go!
Steele said. Joseph moved forward with vulpine grace. He wasn't entirely sure what he was going to do when he got to the wolf. He could use the upgrade, or he could try twisting the knife. It seemed that either might end the threat to Olga, but he didn't have time to do both. So Heidi has passed her trial by fire. Literally. As has Izzy, who has also budged from her staunch anti-rescue position. In the lab, the rest of the rescue party are fighting for their lives, and are also faced with an important decision. But this is a future problem, one that will be determined by the outcome of a poll. In the meantime, feel free to like, comment, and subscribe if you are finding this on YouTube. If you are listening through an RSS feed or other methods, then please by all means do the equivalent there. At any rate, I bid you a good day, until we meet again.